and start. Some people are still coming in. I'm Vicki Campbell. I am now officially the community garden coordinator for the city of Richmond, and that's all I do. I start our money for Parks and Rec. My boss is really funny, so really.
Who's your boss?
Dan Brenner.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Do you know him?
Uh-huh.
He's funny. That's all we need. And apparently we just don't ride around telling jokes. Telling y'all to clean up your gardens. And Duran Chavez is my co-host. He has the McDonough Garden and runs several CSA, which is a consumer supported agriculture. It's 20 pounds or $20 called the Richmond Market. They're not being fans, right? At Battery Park, and you can use your SNAP card. So that's really important as far as getting fresh vegetables to people. We call it food justice. Lisa is the foremost in the whole world, as far as I'm concerned, naturalist. She actually started Tricycle Gardens, which was the beginning of community gardens in Richmond. And she travels all over the world, actually, taking classes in naturalism and I don't know, she knows everything.
You're
So,
exaggerating.
It's true. And last year you taught the Mayor's Youth Academy gardening. They're trying to stick me with that.
Get some antihistamines because you will have an allergic reaction to it.
I just hope I don't swear. If the mayor find that out, I'll be in trouble, right? All right, so we're just gonna let Lisa do what she does, and then afterwards, she's got to run afterwards, and we have Bruno. Bruno, what's your last name? Welsh. And then, why does your mustache go perfect with that name? I don't know. He's going to talk about composting afterwards, so y'all enjoy, take notes, and don't forget to get the bad bugs, good bugs up in the front. Taranto.
Taranto. Or Taranto if you're in Italy.
And if you haven't registered online with Vicki at the Richmond Rose Gardens at Richmond.
At richmondgov.com.
Please do, so that we can stay in communication about any changes and any different events and grants and things like that may become available through the program.
Yeah, and I've sent out a bunch of links of different things to, if you haven't got that, get with me later. And I also brought eggs. I have no egg cartons. I have 100 chickens at home. I've got eggs, just, I don't know how many eggs I got at my house, but please take some in a bag and try to get them home without breaking them. That will be your quest for today.
Okay, so, dear, I like this title because it is absolutely totally misleading. There are some basics, but the nice thing about gardening is that it's a never-ending exploration and learning, but there are some basics, I think, in terms of how nature operates. And that's what I'm going to talk about more than anything, more than I don't know, we'll see how it goes. So, if you have questions at any time, I'd like it to be a little bit more casual, like a discussion, so raise your hand or throw out a question or whatever, and hopefully this will be fun. So, the absolute basics of gardening, or it depends. So, pretty much any question that you ask, there will never be a yes or no answer, which makes gardening really exciting. All right, so healthy soil. I'm going to start with this. This is the foundation of it all. And I personally have become really obsessed with healthy soil over the last few years. It's a really, really fascinating topic. And it's a relatively young science because we're just starting to understand what's going on in the dirt, right? Because it's dark and it's underground and it's relatively invisible. You can't watch it and be like, whoa, look at what's going on, because it doesn't look like there's much going on. But a tablespoon of healthy soil has about 4 billion living organisms in it. Soil is alive, and the soil on this planet is pretty much the foundation for everything that we have in our lives, right? Whether it's this tea that I'm drinking or the paper here from the trees. It can sequester carbon. Scientists are starting to think that there are actually 42 essential chemical and nutrient actions going on in soil that make plants grow, whereas photosynthesis is just 3. But this stuff is all relatively new, and so, a lot of times I think we think, oh, we already know, like science has explained everything, but it hasn't. And what's going on right now in terms of understanding soil and the healthy soil food web it's a pretty new field. So, I could probably spend the next hour and a half just talking about soil, but I'll try and rein it in. I think what's really interesting about it is that globally, we are at about a 30% depletion rate of soil, of healthy soil. And it's being depleted even faster and faster and faster. There's only about 4 deposits in the world, large deposits of really healthy soil, and a lot of it has eroded, right? So we all know about the Dust Bowl. Essentially, once we figured out how we got a plow going, and we ripped the belly of the earth open, and all that soil got exposed and got blown into the air or washed down the Mississippi, we're starting to see these big problems coming up again, right, in the Midwest. So I think we're all pretty aware that the drought situation is bad again, and we're seeing it in the Amazon as soils are being depleted. What's happening in the Fertile Crescent? So building healthy soil should be one of your primary goals with what you're doing with gardening, which is composting is a really big part of it. Mulching heavily, keeping chemicals out of it so that you can keep the healthy organisms doing the work that they do. So you essentially, in your soils, you have can you guys see this at all? I mean, I guess it's kind of small. Let me see if I can. Oh, there we go. Okay. I've just started wearing bifocals, and I'm realizing that my vision is.
Should we turn the lights down? Would that help?
Turn the lights down? Sure. So in the soils, you have there's animals, of course, that live in the soils, like moles and mice, groundhogs, things like that. You have the nematodes and the worms and fungi and protozoas and bacterias, mycelium, which is the network of mushrooms, right? And there's thousands and thousands of kinds of them. The fruiting body that's a mushroom. And it's like a tree produces an apple, well, mycelium produces a mushroom. And it's the mycelium that is part of this major network that knits all the roots together, and it shares nutrients and it shares waste. And mycelium is a really important part of a healthy soil structure, which is one of the reasons that you need to be very careful about doing a lot of tilling or breaking up that surface of the soil, because you break up the mycelial mat. And so, you can go with the whole no-till thing, or you need to be very light, don't go in there and chop the living shit out of your soil, because there's stuff going on in there, they're having their own party. And if you go in there and whack at it, it's not a very good thing to do. Worms, so that's a sign of healthy soil. Worm castings, which is worm poop, is considered a bionic fertilizer, so you want to make sure that you've got a lot of organic material in your soil for the worms. So soil, figure out how to keep it healthy. Get your soil tested. You can send it off to Virginia Tech. I think it costs like $12 or $15 to get your nutrient levels tested. There's a lab in Chesterfield, A&E, is that it? A&L labs. And you can test the salinity of your soil, the amount of organic material that's in your soil, and then the NPK, so nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. I'm sure you guys all know that part of the reason that the Chesapeake Bay is really compromised right now is because of the excess amount of nitrogen and phosphorus runoffs going into the Chesapeake Bay. And so, that's happening at a large scale, but we all can be even with the little tiny bits and parts of the way we grow food or manage our lawn or whatever we do, we're all a part of this. So learn, there's tons of stuff out there that you can learn about soil. So photosynthesis, I think we all probably remember this. And sun mixes with the carbon dioxide, and it produces the sugars, and we get oxygen from it, and that's the basic part of how we get plants to grow. I think one of the interesting things about it, hey Mark, is that what they're thinking about mycelium, again, which is a really, really important part of it, that mycelium actually grows from the radiation from the moon, which I think is, kind of gives you goosebumps if you think about it too much, right?
What does?
Mycelium, mushrooms.
Oh,
So mushrooms, the science is starting to show that they actually absorb the radiation from the moonlight, and that the chlorophyll that we see is the radiation from the sun, photosynthesis. Which, that's pretty cool, I think. All right, water. So that's the other big part of it, of what we're doing. Different plants take different amounts of water, but generally what you want to look at is about 1 inch of water per week on your garden. There's some things that can thrive with a lot less, there's some things that take a lot more, and these are all things that you can look up in your plant charts or in your the seed catalogs, which right now I call seed porn, because they're all coming in. The diagram on the left is what is called a watershed. And how many of you guys know what your watershed address is? Has anyone heard that? One for 2 people?
Your watershed address?
Yeah, do you know what your watershed address is?
No.
What's the closest body of water, running body of water you live near? When it rains, where does the water go?
Upland Creek.
Upland Creek?
Upland Creek.
Oh, okay. So mine's either Gillies Creek or the James River. Where I live is right on the break. Anybody else know?
Reedy Creek and James River.
Reedy Creek? So that's kind of a cool thing to learn, like what is your watershed address? What happens to the water when it hits your property or your garden or wherever you live, where you work? Where does it go? When it hits this parking lot and there's been a lot of cars dripping oil and transmission fluid out of it, that water is going to run off this asphalt, hit the closest creek, and keep going eventually out to the Chesapeake Bay and then into the ocean. Right? And so that's a big part of understanding what is going on with our water systems. Now water, I'm just going to give you a big picture thing about water. So the planet's what, like 70% water, 30% land? Out of that 70%, about 97% of that is salt water. About 2% of it is locked up in the ice caps and glaciers. About 1% of it is available for human use. About 70% of that is used for industrial agriculture and industrial processes. So we have 0.3% of water available on the planet for us to use. And we are starting to see serious problems with depletion of water and pollution of water. So another really important part of what we're doing, harvesting some rainwater. We're starting to have the stormwater taxes now, or fees on it all. So figuring out a way to not only harvest your own water, but keep the water in your soil by mulching heavily. Mulch, 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 mulch. This is one of the big garden basics. Mulch with bag leaves that your neighbors bag every year in a nice polite pile, and you just be like, oh, thank you, that was so nice of you. Now I have all these leaves. Just go and grab a bunch of bags of leaves, stack them up, and then use them through the year as your mulch, or straw, or you can use shredded newspaper, you can use cardboard. But you want to keep your soil as absolutely covered as you can once your seedlings come up. Get that soil so that it's not being exposed directly to sunlight, because that is going to suck the water out of it so fast. So keeping the water in the soil is a big part of a successful garden. And it will save you a lot of time as well. So if you have a way to capture rainwater, do it. All right. Gardening is essentially, it's a relationship. Just like you have a relationship with a person. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And you can really tell when people spend a lot of time in their gardens and they look loved. And you know, you hear about these crazy experiments where people touch their plants a lot or play nice music to it, or, you know, or yell, you know, like they've done experiments where you're like, fuck you, you stupid fucking plant, you're ugly. And then, or, you know, I love you. And they do grow differently. So there is an energetic relationship that's going on with your garden and what you do. And so you need to get out there and nurture it and love it and really, you know, it's a relationship. In Richmond, in August, it is a hateful relationship. But you have to get over it. And you have to be willing to get out there and put the love into your garden. You know, it's just as simple as that. You don't need fancy techniques. You just need to be able to get out there and observe and interact. One of the other things I do is permaculture, and the first principle of that is observation and interaction before you really do anything major. And that's, you know, the same thing with a person. It's observation and interaction. It's going to take a lot of time. You have to be comfortable with having really ratty fingernails. And just be ready to get out there and sweat, because in August, in July, August, September, wait a minute, June, July, August, September. It's, you know, so really, it's be prepared to dedicate some serious time with it. All right, so I'm going to talk about seeds right now. There are many ways to grow plants. Of course, you have from seed, you can grow like a potato, which is a tuber, that's considered a seed. One of the things I like to do, so how many of you guys have a garden already? So a few of you. Okay, have you noticed, do you let plants go to seed and let them kind of move around in the garden and live where they want to live? So once you get a garden up and running after a few years, you'll notice if you let your stuff go to seed, which I highly recommend, like this is a romaine lettuce here. Lettuces, basils, some tomatoes, even cucumbers, things that have really small seeds. What I'll do is I'll let things like this go to seed, and there's the basil. And so it gets really crispy and brown and dry, and the wind will just knock those seeds out, and they'll just migrate around, and when spring comes, you've already got a garden going, and you don't even have to have done anything about it. And so they will, and they kind of go where they want to go. And so it's really neat, because there's a part of wanting to control your garden versus letting these plants move around and be wherever they want to be. You know, there's all the rotation as well, like you don't want to grow tomatoes or the nightshades, tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes in the same place year after year. You could use green beans, any of the legumes, soybeans, green beans, hairy vetch, things like that, which are the legumes, that they actually will put more nitrogen back into the soil. So that's one of the things that, you know, and it depends on whether you're somebody who keeps a really rigorous spreadsheet about what you're doing every year, and you know, you have it all planned out for 3 years. I tend to be a little bit more of a casual gardener, and I'll forget what I had there the year before. You know, but generally one of the main things I try and do is just keep a crop of some kind of legume rotating throughout my garden. And they grow really fast as well. So the other thing with legumes and plants in general, when they're dying off, let them die off. Do not pull the whole root system out of the ground. Cut them at the base. Let the root system decompose back into the soil, because that's where there's all kinds of action going on with the mycelium, with the nematodes. There's good nematodes and bad nematodes, but you know, with all of this nutrient-heavy action is happening around the roots. So don't pull them out. Cut it off at the base. Let the roots decompose back into the soil, and you know, your soil will about tomatoes, if they're falling off in your garden, and the skin stays intact and the sun is hitting them, they become these little fermenting machines in there. And then they'll mature, or they'll reach that happy point, and then they'll be able to grow again. You can save tomato seeds and pepper seeds by scooping the pulp out, putting them in a jar and letting it start to bubble and ferment. And that's how you can save your own seeds with that. What
Well,
else?
can you expand on that a little bit? Because I've tried this recently and it's kind of yucky. All right, so you're gonna ferment them, it starts getting ugly. You're not rinsing them, you just let them stay and get...
Yeah, once, I don't remember how long it is, you can look it up, but yeah, once they've kind of fermented enough, you want to rinse them. And then
pull
put them on a
apart.
paper, and put them on a paper towel and let them dry really well.
Okay.
And then save them.
And then what's your favorite way? I mean, you put them in the refrigerator after you dry
No,
them?
I just put them in an envelope. So there's still air going through them. If you put them in a tight jar, if there's any moisture in them
They'll rot.
whatsoever, it will start to rot. And so germination, anybody know what the combo is to turn a plant on? Water, temperature,
Pressure.
and oxygen. So that's what it takes. And it's the temperature that's the sweet spot. So you can find germination charts online or in any, like Johnny Selected Seeds has really good germination charts for all of the seeds that you buy. And you need to find that sweet spot for the germination. And so it's kind of like a curve that will go up like this. The cool, you get into that sweet spot. If it's too cool or if it's too warm, it will just take longer. But you want to have a consistent temperature. If you're starting seeds yourself inside, you want to have a consistent temperature. And it doesn't need to be light. They don't need light. They just need the oxygen, the temperature, and the moisture to do it. So some people will just take a paper towel and put their seeds on it and get it wet and roll that up and stick it in a bag. Make sure that oxygen can get in there, but it stays moist and the seeds will germinate like that. Or you could do it in a soil-less mix. So, I think with all of it, just experiment and have fun. Seeds are cheap. It's not like it's a huge investment that you're making, and it's just really fun to see what is going on with these, that switch that goes on.
When you're talking about oxygen, you mean like just add perlite or something to your, and what is a soilless mix? In other words, whatever you're putting it in, there's got to be a lot of airflow?
Yeah.
I mean,
It just
can't
needs
be
air. It just
compacted.
needs air. Yeah, you don't want to compact it so hard that it can't.
Well, we all started our okra early last year because it was so warm, and they didn't germinate till the middle of June. I mean, no one got there, it just wouldn't.
Yeah, well, okra needs
a lot of
heat. Basil, I think everyone makes this mistake. Like, I'm getting my basil started, it's March. Like basil's like, give me 90 degrees and I will be your lover forever. So, and I can't remember all of the temperature ranges, but just, it's out there and you can find it. And then the first leaf that comes out, this is called the cotyledon. I think I have that right. And this is actually not considered a true leaf. This has the nutrients in it that the seed feeds off of it before the true leaves come out of it. And this is what's sort of tucked into the seed as it unfurls and starts to come alive. So for purchasing seeds or acquiring seeds, I really like Johnny's Selected Seeds. They're out of Maine. Here in Virginia, we have the Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, which is amazing, out in Louisa. There's lots of people have plant swaps and seed swaps, so you can hook up with that's going on, and you really don't have to spend that much money on seeds.
Sally at the library is going to start a seed library. I'm going to meet
Oh, great.
about that.
Great.
To where you would take some seeds home, at the end of the year, you bring some back.
Mm.
So that you can, could you talk a little bit about Monsanto seeds?
A little bit.
Well, I just heard that they bought the Southern State seeds. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all GMOs.
Right.
But and I love Southern States, and it's right by my house, and
Yeah,
I go
it's
there every
convenient.
week.
So,
And now I'm really upset because I like to buy a big bag of corn.
yeah. Well, the whole thing with GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and the Green Revolution, we have this situation. We have 7 billion people on the planet. Soon to be 9 billion people by 2050. Most of that population growth is going to be in the developing countries, not in the first world. So actually in developing countries, some populations are actually in decline. And so when you look at the food system, I think what's interesting for me at a political level is that for many people, it's an invisible thing. They have no connection whatsoever. You go into these grocery stores, these mega, chemical bomb grocery stores, and you're like, where does all that food come from? And it is full every day. Like, where is this coming from? And how are we gonna, it's so complex, and the amount of money that is wrapped up in the food system. And in America, with the Farm Bill, we essentially are subsidizing this massive industry of commodified soy, corn, I think sunflower, is it rapeseed, which makes canola oil, wheat, to the tune of billions and billions of dollars a year. This is part of what our tax money is going to. And it's making us sick, but it's subsidizing these mega big corporations, like 3 of them. Archer Daniel Midlands, Cargill, Monsanto, there's probably a handful of smaller ones. And it's a big, complicated mess. And they're incredibly powerful. They sort of, in a lot of ways, own the government. And we are tinkering with things at a genetic level that we don't know what the results are going to be, Part of what they do is they go in and they isolate the DNA and they break it apart and they'll insert the DNA, say from a cold water fish, into a tomato so that it can withstand cold more. They will also break it up and they can put E. coli into it to make it E. coli resistant. And so we don't know what's going to be happening, but this is if you are buying food in the grocery store that you do not know where it came from, you are ingesting this stuff right now. So, and it's unavoidable. You cannot, if you go ever eat in a restaurant for one meal, it's unavoidable and it's a big mess. And, the flip side of it is that we're subsidizing a medical industry now to compensate for the fact that we have these insane levels of diabetes and heart disease and obesity. And so we're subsidizing a system that is making us sick, and then we're subsidizing a system that is supposed to make us well. And if you think about it too much, your head will pop off. So, but we have to do our little tiny bit to make a difference of growing your own food and going to farmers markets and keeping it simple. We don't need to eat a complex diet. You don't need to eat something that has 30 ingredients in it. An apple is really quite a sufficient snack. So, all right, moving on. Unless anybody else wants to rant. Okay, so fertilizers. Now, I talked a little bit about the green manures or cover crops. Again, you can buy mixes that have things like hairy vetch, Siberian snow peas, certain kinds of oats that you grow, and then you can cut them, let them dry up a little bit, and work that right back into the soil. So again, you're leaving the roots in there, you're letting the roots decompose back into the soil. And there are certain plants that we call dynamic accumulators. And what they are is they actually have a pretty deep root system. their roots will go down and they will start to pull nutrients up from pretty far down into the soil, and they'll bring the nutrients up into the higher levels of the soil. So actually hemp is a really good dynamic accumulator if you can full grown that off without getting in trouble. I encourage it. Comfrey, is it comfrey? Yeah, comfrey is a really good dynamic accumulator. The beans, you know, are pretty good dynamic accumulators, and that's a big part of how do you work those into the growing system, which again is this relationship, you know. You don't just have a relationship from April 1st to whenever your garden is shut down at the end of the year. These are constant things that you're watching and you're rotating and they're moving around your garden. It's dynamic, it's alive. But things like comfrey, you can grow those. It's a pretty big plant with a beautiful pinkish purple bellflower thing on it, pretty big leaves. You can cut those leaves and just use them as a mulch, and as they're breaking down, they're feeding nutrients back into the soil, or you can put them into your compost. So the cover crops, that's a good way to you know, keep things active and rotate that around. You can plant them in the fall or in the spring. The fish and kelp emulsions, you can buy those in a concentrate at your local garden store. You can order it. It is pretty stinky, and just so you know, if you live in tight quarters for about 24 hours, it will smell pretty bad. Composted chicken manure, if you can get your hands on that. You can buy at Southern States, they have one called, is it I call it cock-a-doo-doo. It's like
Chicken doo-doo.
what is it?
Chicken doo-doo.
Chicken doo-doo, yeah, so you can buy that. Is it there? They have an organic one. Compost tea. The thing about compost tea is, from my understanding, you really need to be making compost tea on site and using it right away. And what it is taking compost, mixing it with water, and aerating it. So it's like, you know how in a fish tank you have bubbles going all the time in it, and that keeps oxygen moving throughout it? Well, this is a similar thing with a compost tea, and you have the oxygen or air moving through that, and that makes the bacteria, the healthy bacteria, double in population. I don't know, like, it's insane how fast it grows. You probably know, Bruno, huh?
The exact number I'm not sure, but if you leave it long enough, it's pretty close.
Yeah, yeah. And so compost teas, you can just use, you know, a cup of compost tea, and you dilute it more with water, and you just have a powerhouse, because it's the bacteria around the roots, which is called the rhizosphere. So imagine my finger is a root hair. The area around the root is called the rhizosphere, kind of like we have the ecosphere around the planet, or the biosphere. This is called the rhizosphere. It's, you know, it's microscopic. You can't really see it, but this is where all the action is going on with the bacteria and the mycelium. They're actually exchanging nutrients and other information back and forth between each other. And so that's what you want to. And I cannot explain the whole thing with cat ions, and you know, I don't know if you know all that stuff, but there are people that go and get their beyond PhDs in this, and I'm not one of them. But so compost, you know, if you're making your own compost, good for you. Just a little story so you can understand the scale of what we throw away in this country. If you can, you know what would be a cool field trip for you to figure out how to do as part of this program is the Shoesmith Brothers landfill, which is in Chesterfield. It's one of the largest landfills in the country. So stuff is coming down all the way from Manhattan. They're trucking it down 95 in big tractor trailers, and they also barge it down the inland waterway up the James River, get it onto trucks, and bring it over here to Chesterfield, to the Shoesmith Brothers landfill. About 50% of what's coming in, I can't remember if it's by weight or volume, is food scraps. They're producing enough methane off of that landfill that it goes into a generator house to power 10,000 houses a day from the methane from the rotting food. I mean, the scale of that is mind-boggling, you know? So if you can compost at home, or if you have a friend that composts, or if there's a community garden near you, figure out how to get your food and veggie scraps into a compost pile. Composted manures, you can buy those or, get that going on in yourself. Somebody that has a farm, you can get out to the farm, get some of that. And then the vermicompost, which is from the worms eating veggie scraps and compost and pooping. And then you've got the worm casting, which is a bionic fertilizer. And worms, actually, they kill pathogens in their guts as well. And so, we hear all this stuff about these different outbreaks in our food system of the E. coli. And this is happening because we've messed up the balance so terribly that these things are winning the battle, right? Oh, it's a mess. Really, the sicker we are, the higher the GDP goes. So we got to figure this out. Okay, so this is the USDA Planet Hardiness Zone Map.